Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking Main Street, the small business lender who helps it grow. The Sextons are in the house. Welcome, Delaney. Welcome, Lance.
Good
Lance,
to be here.
you are going to be at America East, at Nashville Music City. Where are you going next week?
I'm going to the Music City Lenders Conference in Nashville. For any of you who may be going, I look forward to the opportunity to see you, so make sure and come find me.
Well, you're also doing a breakout session. What are you doing?
We'll be doing a breakout session on my favorite topic, Bob, servicing and liquidation.
All right. Yeah. So if you go ahead, Lance.
And Bob, the same song and dance. Servicing and liquidation is going to be the most important part of SBA lending in the last half of 2022, first half of 2023.
That's true. So if you go, this is a certificate for today's training. And if you go for, why do we have certified SBA 7A loan training, Joseph? Oh, I see. Joseph, we should change it to just SBA training. It's not, because we also talk about other stuff. Anyway, take a copy of Lance's, I guess, the program, scan it in, and make a note that you did it as well, and start documenting your files.
Absolutely.
Hey, I want to talk about the big news. Lance, you talk about a stealth rollout of something that is huge. And when I mean a stealth rollout, it was buried in the Federal Register notice of June 30th. It was the proposed final rule. The final rule did go into effect on August 1st. We did get a Federal Register notice on fixed rate interest rates. And we talked about that Monday. But also, and we've confirmed this with SBA, that these are the new rates that are effective also August 1st. Lance, I have no idea why they didn't send out a notice, why they're not talking about it. I will defer that to you.
Well, I think it's a huge news item.
It is huge.
Because, I mean the biggest item, okay, two things it did. One, no longer are variable interest rates dependent upon term. They're only dependent upon the size of the loan. So you don't have a less than 7 year or less than so many year term or more than so many year term. Now it's just based on the size of the loan. And always on the smaller SBA loans, you were able to get prime plus a more aggressive spread. But I think the huge item is the loans over $350,000 instead of prime plus 2 3/4 on a longer term. On a shorter term, it was prime plus 2 1/4. Any loan over $350,000 can now be prime plus 3. And, you know, I can imagine a lot of comments that might come out. You know, one comment is, why would we increase the maximum interest rate in a time when interest rates are increasing without much effort, because the Fed, you know, prime rate keeps going up. The Fed keeps raising the Fed funds rate. Well, going to prime plus 3 does a couple of things. One, it encourages small business lending institutions to do more SBA lending. Two, we have seen the investor premiums on loans sold in the secondary market decline. I think prime plus 3, adjustable quarterly, we may see a nice little uptick in premiums. That's just me projecting, but
well, of course, you get a higher yield, you're going to get a higher.
Absolutely. So, and something I always like to point out, when you look at smaller SBA loans, a lot of institutions love to do $1 million, $2 million larger SBA loans, but those 50,000 and under right now, prime plus 6.5, that's 12%. So, I mean, there is a reasonable yield on those smaller SBA loans. So, again, these are our interest rates under 50, prime plus 6.5, 50 to 250, prime plus 6, 250 to 350, prime plus 4.5, and the big one, over 350 prime plus.
Well, I may disagree with you on that. I think a big one is the 250 to 350, even 100,000 and up. I mean, those are a $250,000 loan at prime plus 6. That's start.
Oh yeah.
You're going to overheat the calculator on your returns.
11.
That's significant.
Yeah, that starts out at 11.5%. Bob, you and I have not seen, and many people on this call may have never seen interest rates like that, but it's been a while since I've seen a.
Yeah, when prime hits 20, then we can talk about the battle.
Yeah.
So now that we've hit you with that, just what do you think?
I know where they're going to be on this one, Bob.
I know where you are.
Yeah.
There you go, 60%. Oh yeah, my recommendation is down there with 13%. Well, I'm with you, 13%ers.
Well, again, most of what gets sold on the secondary market is over 350, and we all would like to see premiums tick back up because it's a great source of non-interest income, and hopefully that's one thing that will be accomplished.
Right.
But the other thing is I think it encourages lenders.
Well,
to do
there's
more
a couple
SBA.
things on that. It says, quote, by basing the rates on loan amounts instead of maturities, lenders have more incentive to make smaller loans to businesses in need of credit, i.e. underserved markets, on reasonable terms. And that's what's interesting about this is SBA has defined these as reasonable terms. And SBA is absolutely correct when you compare them what's happening with some of these fintech returns.
Yeah.
Currently, the maximum rates are depending on the type of loan, and they make, i.e. Express, Export Express, Community Advantage. By standardizing the maximum variable for all the programs, it simplifies it. So these are now all the programs instead of having a smorgasbord of fees. And as Lance said, also we are not concerned about maturity. Now, however, this is interesting, Lance, and I need help on this one. However, the interest rate must never exceed the maximum allowable interest rate stated in paragraph D of this section.
What maximum interest?
Yeah, I haven't found a paragraph D yet. I'm still looking for it.
Well, I think,
conclude. I'm sorry, Lance, and then the same sentence says, and these loans may be sold on the secondary market. Well, those are two completely different themes there. So talk about run-on sentence. Anyway, Lance, go ahead.
Well, I think it does simplify. You don't have to stop and think, oh, this is a 7-year loan. It's got a lower spread than a 10-year loan or an 11-year or a 15-year loan. So it does simplify it. Making it spread across programs helps to simplify it as well. And again, hopefully this will be what encourages SBA lenders to be more active. Now, I will say this, many of you may or may not have lived through the Great Recession, but every time, I've been in SBA lending long enough, and Bob, you have as well, every time we have a recessionary period, we usually have great SBA lending, great volume. So hopefully this will be another stimulus in SBA lending.
Yeah. A couple of other things is they have done away with the guarantee fees on veterans. That was only waived if the program was at zero subsidy, i.e. it paid for itself. There was not a taxpayer subsidy. They got away with that. So veterans, spouses of veterans will have that guarantee fee waived. My final thought on this, and Lance, you and I are going to talk about this next Wednesday. We're going to go through this, and we're going to talk about it from a marketing standpoint, from a logistical standpoint. And we're going to be talking about interest rates in depth in terms of structure, and it's good. I'm putting together the PowerPoint. It's a fun one to put together. But Lance, talk to me very briefly about justification. Is SBA going to be saying, well, if you're charging prime plus 6 on a $100,000 loan, why are you're charging prime plus 3 on your conventional loans? Is SBA going to be looking at the spread of your conventional commercial loans?
I don't think so, Bob, because SBA has to meet the credit elsewhere proof. And credit elsewhere typically means that the loan is not conforming to your commercial lending policy, which means it's riskier, which means it should have a higher rate.
And I would put that in my credit memo.
Yep.
Yeah, I would document that file, absolutely.
Oh, the one thing I wanted to mention, Bob, the Veterans Advantage, what used to be called Veterans Advantage, very pleased to see that veterans or spouse of a veteran will get waiver of the SBA guarantee fee on SBA Express loans, and that's permanent now. That's not subject to.
I don't know why they did not go to sons of veterans also. That would have been.
No, I agree. I agree.
Craig asked a great question. The answer is I don't know. Lance, do you?
No, Bob. Craig, ask me that question again in September.
You cut out there a little bit, Lance. Repeat that.
No, I was just saying, I think it'd be helpful if Craig asked that question again in September. We probably will.
Well, we are waiting for the new SOP, which should clarify all this, and that's we are definitely in murky waters on that. So that's it. All right. Well, that's it for that. We've attached the Federal Register notice to the dashboard. Feel free to read that. But as I said, Lance and I are going to sort this all out on Wednesday. Delaney, Fraud Friday. What do you mean a former? Well, I guess he is former, or she is. Stephen. We'll assume Stephen is a he. But what did he do?
Yes, this was an interesting story. So Steve was previously an auditor and a fraud investigator for the Department of Revenue in South Dakota up until 2015. Recently, he's being accused of writing and depositing 5 bad checks worth about $150,000. And in addition, he got a $20,000 PPP loan for a remodeling business. It was not a real business, of course. But this is not his first time committing fraud either. He was actually found guilty of money laundering and bank fraud back in 2018. He received 2 years in prison.
I could be snarky, Lance, and say, if you're going to commit fraud, why go $20,000? How come not $3 million? But go ahead, Lance.
Oh, Bob, when Delaney was telling the story, I was sitting there the whole time thinking, a fraud investigator should be able to do this better than that. But it's but it is an example of the kind of fraud we're seeing in the PPP program right now. Small businesses that don't exist, people that but again, I guess the big point of this story that I took out of it is this guy used to be a fraud investigator, right? Yeah. So.
Yeah. Character, trust but verify. What else you got, Delaney?
This next story, Miss Dara Buck, she is a soldier, or I'm going to guess potentially a former soldier. She recently admitted to submitting over 150 PPP loan applications along with some co-conspirators for herself and others. They managed to get $3.5 million in disbursements. All of this was directly put into her bank account, and she would later pay these other co-conspirators for their contributions. In addition, she also falsified Department of Veterans Affairs certifications for total and permanent disability. She would send these documents to the Department of Education and secured over a dozen loans, student loans, for more than $1 million.
Wow.
Lance, when you're doing this type of transactions, you're leaving quite a paper trail, and that's why we're getting a lot of these guilty pleas. Very few of these are going to trial, Lance.
I can't imagine, your typical PPP fraud. Again, PPP, the lenders relied on the borrower's certification. So if there is fraud, guess who lied? The applicant. And there are ways to track. I mean, I've been amazed, Bob. I'm very old school, but in watching our FBI agents, Inspector General agents, and various people tracking fraud, how they substantiate, whether or not it's fraudulent and how they can prove it. By the time they actually make the arrest, they've got enough information. The PPP fraudster needs to just say, I'm guilty.
And these are all coming in, I'm assuming, from tips to the Inspector General. They're not out there knocking on doors. They're getting tips, say, hey, investigate so-and-so and so-and-so, because it's easy to do for them.
Well, there's a very active number of people throughout the country who, as a participant lender, if you get a phone call from somebody who's claiming fraud, if you know it's fraud, then you're going to report it to the SBA Inspector General. That's what you should do. But there are people who are just calling the SBA Inspector General hotline and saying, my cousin Jimmy, who lives across the street, got a PPP loan, and he doesn't own a business, and it starts the process. I believe they'll be investigating fraud in the PPP loan program for years.
Oh, absolutely. And as we've said before, this is significantly different than the 2008-2009 TARP investigations, where they went after the exclusively community bankers, and those cases are still being adjudicated. It's talk about ruining lives, and a number of those people have been found not guilty. Now, there are some obvious cases of fraud, and obviously when you're the lender, go ahead and do that. But it's a different rodeo this time around, Lance.
Well, I think the one thing I'm looking forward to is Delaney reporting on a PPP case that, let's say it's a $20,833 PPP fraud case, just one month. Because a lot of these are people who, in the case of Ms. Buck, got 150 PPP loans. None of them were large. They were smaller loans. But by virtue of getting $3.5 million, probably will get sentenced for a while.
Oh, 3.5, yeah. She's going to get 4 to 5 years, definitely.
Yeah. So, but what I'm going to be curious, guys, is when we get the single individual $20,000 loan who committed PPP fraud, and that just one, what is the sentence going to be on that case?
For that, probably it's a felony, and it will go on the person's record as a felony, but they'll probably get, I doubt they would even get prison time, but it will go on their record, which is one of the things also we're going to talk about on Wednesday very briefly. Is there are changes to how SB is interpreting criminal definitions of criminal eligibility. So that is something that's a long conversation. That Delaney, wrap it up. What's our third story?
I will try and get through this pretty quick. Mr. Robert Calloway was the former executive vice president for First NBC Bank. He worked with a couple other people. Please do not quote me on this, but I believe it was the president and the COO. There was a number of borrowers, though Calloway seemed to only be involved with one. They would essentially hide his creditworthiness whenever they got him these loans, saying he would be able to pay loans with revenue from his business. He could not, and I'm quoting this, his spending was out of control. His business did not generate sufficient income. They managed to hide all of this, keep it away from auditors and the board of directors.
Yeah, what they did, Lance, was the old school. We have a line of credit for $1 million, and it's due in 6 months or a year, and we roll it over in a year, and we charge an additional couple points, and we bump it up to 1.3 million. That, according to the feds, is illegal. You cannot do that. You have to pay off that $1 million loan is paid off by, as Delaney said, revenues from the company, and we're not simply rolling over bad debt, because what the feds are saying is that $1 million should be charged off and taken off the bank's books.
Absolutely, especially if there's no evidence that no proof of repayment. Now, back before the Great Recession, that was a reasonably common practice of lenders on lines of credit. They'd get to the end, they'd roll it over and take a problem asset and make it a performing asset.
And make fees off of it, charge fees.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And that's part of the reason why they prohibit that. But anyway,
Lance, I'll tell you one quick funny story. Not funny, but Joseph and I got an email in error by a banker to another banker who said, "This sounds just like so-and-so. We need to deal with this." And then they found out, to their horror, they sent it to us, and we said, "No, don't worry, we're not going to."
Going to end up on Friday's show. No,
no, we're not going to do that to you. Don't. We will abide by your disclaimer that says that the email is for the person that it's supposed to go to. So, but yeah, so be careful with that. Be careful. And here we're talking about conventional lines of credits, but this is what a lot of the bankers under TARP were after, and they're still going after. Basically now, if you're in a bank that's closing, because this is again different, we're not closing banks every Friday, but if you're in a bank that's closed, the odds are someone's going to be indicted.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've spent 2 parts of my career working as a resolutions and receivership person with FDIC. And anytime a bank closes, there's usually an executive somewhere that's done something wrong that goes to jail.
Yeah. And you need to know the rules. I mean, part of this is you get cozy with the customers, and you can't do that. These criminals are criminals, and they know how to lie.
Absolutely.
Real quick, Joseph, bring up the slide for Wednesday. There we go. We're going to be talking about this. We're going to be talking about the regulations, the prime interest rate. I'm also going to be talking about positioning this in marketing and in structuring loans. And I'm going to talk a lot about when you should use fixed rate loans, a strategy of selling that to the secondary market. And I'm also going to be talking about swaps a little bit. You can, if you're concerned about borrower defaults. Look, I know we're over. I'm going to end with this comment, Lance. And my comment is the reason why lenders are supposed to do variable rates is it takes away the risk. My response is that is untrue. It does not take away the lender risk. What it does, it puts the risk to the borrower, and if they default, then you're going to lose that asset. So the lenders don't get sucked into the theory that, we have a variable rate loan, we're going to be okay when rates rise. That's not true. Go ahead, Lance. I'll let you finish up.
Well, you make a great point, Bob. Increasing interest rates don't take risk away from participant lenders. In fact, as small businesses struggle with cash flow, it increases the risk, but variable rate loans do eliminate rate risk. But I think we're all going to experience more problem SBA loans in the next year or so because of rising interest rates. And any SBA loan that met the SBA's 1.15 DCR, probably if it was a 1.15, is not debt covering now. So
very good. Delaney, thank you very much. Lance, we'll see you Monday. And before you take off, are you flying or driving to Nashville?
We're actually doing a road trip over to Nashville, which is going to be fun.
Good barbecue on the way out there.
Our good folks at Fountainhead are providing a chariot for us to take over to Nashville, so it's going to be a fun trip.
Thank you for joining us today for Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time.
Have a great weekend.
Nice weekend.
Thank you for joining us today for today's episode. If you like today's content, hit that subscribe button to subscribe to our channel and click that bell icon to get notified about our latest videos. Thank you again for joining us today and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time. Catch you next time.